My husband gave our $45,000 IVF savings to his stepsister for a mental health vacation. There's plenty of time, he smirked. I calmly replied, excellent. He had no idea that 2 weeks ago, I had. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My husband, Russell, called me from his stepsister's house. I remember I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. It was a Tuesday. Just a regular, boring Tuesday. I saw his name on the screen and smiled. I thought he was calling to see if I needed him to pick anything up for dinner on his way home. Hey, honey, I answered, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I wrung out the sponge. Lorraine, he said. His voice was off. It had this strange, forced confidence to it, like a teenager trying to convince his parents he hadn't been drinking. I'm over at Brenda's. Brenda was his stepsister. His father had remarried when Russell was already in college. I'd never been particularly close with her. She was one of those people who seemed to live in a constant state of self-inflicted drama. But she was family, so I was always polite. Oh, okay. Is everything all right? I asked. There was a pause. I could hear him take a deep breath on the other end of the line. Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, I did something. But it's a good thing. I know you'll understand. My hand stilled on the counter. My stomach did a slow, nervous flip. What did you do, Russell? His voice crackled, attempting to sound proud, but it just came out shaky. Honey, I took our IVF savings, the $45,000, and I gave it to Brenda. The sponge fell from my hand and landed in the sink with a soft thud. $45,000. 3 years of my extra shifts at the hospital. 3 years of Russell's bonuses that he proudly announced he was putting straight into our baby fund. 3 years of saying no to vacations, to new furniture, to a car that didn't make a rattling noise every time it went over 60 miles an hour. 3 years of hopes and dreams, of charting cycles and endless doctor's appointments, of picturing a little nursery where the spare room was. All of it, packed into a single number. And he'd just given it away. You, what? I whispered. The words felt foreign in my mouth. I gave it to Brenda for her dream vacation, he said, his voice gaining that false confidence again. She's had such a rough time with her divorce. She really needs a break, a chance to find herself again. A luxury trip to Europe. She deserves it more than we need a baby right now. She deserves it more. The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of my kitchen. More than our years of trying. More than my aching arms that longed to hold a child. More than the future we were supposed to be building together. I looked around our small kitchen, at the photos on the fridge, us, smiling on our wedding day. I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was the kind of calm that comes after the explosion, when the dust is settling and you can finally see the full extent of the damage. My hand, which had been gripping the counter so hard my knuckles were white, relaxed. Excellent, I replied, my voice perfectly steady. There was a dead pause on the other end. This wasn't the reaction he had expected. He'd been braced for tears, for screaming, for the kind of emotional outburst he'd grown so good at dismissing as my baby fever. He got calm, chilling acceptance instead. Excellent, he stammered. That's it? Yes, I said, my voice as even as a frozen lake. Thanks for letting me know. I hung up before he could respond, before the tremor in my hands could travel up to my voice. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone. He had no idea. He had absolutely no idea what he had just done. My phone buzzed almost immediately. It was Russell. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. On the fifth buzz, I picked it up, putting it on speaker and placing it on the counter. I didn't want that thing anywhere near my head. "Lorraine, what the hell was that?" he demanded, all pretense of kindness gone. "You can't just say excellent and hang up on me." "You wanted me to know," I said, my voice still eerily calm. "I know." The conversation seemed to be over. "No, it's not over," he huffed, and I could picture him pacing around Brenda's living room, running a hand through his hair in frustration. He was a man who needed his decisions to be validated, especially the bad ones. He needed me to either fight him, so he could play the role of the reasonable husband calming down his hysterical wife, or he needed me to agree with him, so he could feel righteous. My quiet acceptance had thrown him completely off script. "Look," he started, his tone shifting into the condescending one he used whenever he was explaining something to me that he thought was for my own good. "I know you're probably upset deep down. But you have to see the bigger picture. Brenda has been through hell. Her ex-husband was a real piece of work, and this divorce has just wrecked her. She needs this. It's a mental health necessity. A mental health necessity." A $45,000 trip to Paris, Rome, and Barcelona was a mental health necessity. Meanwhile, my actual, time-sensitive medical necessity was apparently just a casual hobby we could pick up again whenever it was convenient. "We can always save up again for the IVF," he continued, his voice dripping with false patience. "It took us 3 years, we can do it again. You're only 34, Lorraine. There's plenty of time. It's not a race. There's plenty of time." That was the line that broke through the calm. It felt like a physical blow. A hot flash crawled up my neck, and the edges of my vision started to prickle. He didn't know it, but with that one sentence, he had just confessed to a crime far worse than simply giving away our money. He had stolen our future. He had stolen my last chance. And he'd done it with a smug, self-satisfied tone that said he thought he was being the hero of the story. "I have to go," I said, my voice tight. "I'm running late for my shift." "Lorraine, wait, we need to talk about this properly." "There's nothing to talk about, Russell," I interrupted, and this time, the ice in my voice was unmistakable. "You made a decision. You informed me of it. I acknowledged it. Have a good evening." I hung up again, and this time I turned the phone off. I leaned against the counter, my whole body starting to shake. As a pediatric nurse, I'd learned to keep my composure in crisis situations. I'd held screaming children while doctors set broken bones, I'd comforted parents who had just received the worst news of their lives. Right now, that training was the only thing keeping me upright. Because I knew a secret. A terrible, time-sensitive secret that made Russell's betrayal 1,000 times more devastating. He had no idea that just 2 weeks ago, my world had already been tilting on its axis. 2 weeks ago, I had sat in the sterile, quiet office of Dr. Torres, my fertility specialist. I'd gone in alone for the follow-up on my latest round of tests. Russell was supposed to come, but Brenda had a last-minute crisis with a leaky faucet that he absolutely had to go and fix. It was always something with Brenda. I remember the way Dr. Torres's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She had that gentle but firm look that doctors get when they have to deliver bad news. She slid a chart across the desk towards me. It was covered in numbers and graphs that meant nothing to me. "Lorraine," she began, folding her hands on the desk. "We've been monitoring your condition for a while now. As you know, your diminished ovarian reserve is the primary issue we're tackling with IVF." I nodded, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "Is something wrong?" "The new test results show that your condition is deteriorating more rapidly than we anticipated," she said, her voice soft but direct. "Your numbers have dropped significantly in the last 6 months." I just stared at her, the blood draining from my face. "What does that mean, exactly?" "It means our window of opportunity is closing," she said, and her words were like a judge's gavel. "If you and Russell want to proceed with IVF using your own eggs, we need to act. Not in a year. Not in 6 months. We need to start the next cycle. Realistically, we have a viable chance for the next 3 months. After that, she trailed off, but I knew what she meant. After that, my chances would drop to near zero. I remember driving home from that appointment in a daze. 3 months. The clock had been ticking, and I hadn't even heard it. I hadn't told Russell yet. I wanted to find the right moment. I wanted to present it not as a panic, but as a plan. I'd started gathering resources, looking at financing options just in case our savings weren't quite enough, making lists. I was preparing for the most important fight of our lives. And now, Russell, in his infinite, careless wisdom, had taken our weapons, our armor, and our war chest, and handed them over to his stepsister so she could go take selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower. There's plenty of time. His words mocked me from every corner of the silent house. He hadn't just given away our money. He had given away my body's last chance, our last hope. And he'd done it without a single conversation, without a moment of hesitation. He had made a unilateral decision about my future, about our future, and the casual cruelty of it took my breath away. That secret, that ticking 3-month clock, was now my secret weapon. He thought he'd taken everything. He had no idea what he had just armed me with. I turned my phone back on an hour later, needing to check in with my unit at the hospital before my shift. A text message from Brenda was waiting for me. My finger hovered over the delete button, but a morbid curiosity made me open it. OMG, Lorraine, Russ told me what he did. You are seriously the best for understanding. I was so worried you'd be mad, but he said you were so cool about it. I know how much you guys wanted that baby stuff, so this means the world to me. I can't wait to post pics from Paris. Love you, sis. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was breathtaking. The casual use of baby stuff, as if it were a new handbag we were saving for. The patronizing relief that I wasn't mad. And the love you, sis. That was the part that made my blood run cold. She wasn't my sister. She was a woman who had entered our lives when her mother married my father-in-law, and she had acted like a leech ever since. That text message was a catalyst. It ignited a spark of suspicion that had been dormant for years. Suddenly, I was replaying the last 8 years of my marriage through a new, darker lens. Every time Brenda had a crisis, it seemed to coincide with a milestone for Russell and me. I remembered the down payment for our first house. We were just a few $1,000s short. I'd suggested asking my parents for a small loan, but Russell had been adamant we do it ourselves. 2 weeks later, he came home looking sheepish. Brenda needed help with an emergency security deposit and first month's rent for a new apartment after a dramatic breakup. He'd given her the money. It set our home buying goal back by a full year. I remembered our honeymoon. We were supposed to go to Hawaii. A week before the trip, Brenda's car broke down. She claimed she needed it for her job and couldn't afford the repairs. Russell co-signed a loan for a new car for her. It meant we had to cancel our honeymoon and settle for a long weekend at a cheap motel 2 towns over. It wasn't just money. It was his time, his attention. Our anniversary dinner he missed because she'd had a panic attack. The promotion he was up for at work, where he missed a crucial meeting because he had to drive her to the airport. Every time, her needs, her dramas, her wants, were placed on an altar, and our life together was the sacrifice. And now, looking at her smug text message, a sickening thought began to form in my mind. Her wording. He said you were so cool about it. It was too familiar. Too casual. And her breakup with her ex-husband, it had always been vague. No one had ever actually met the guy. A cold dread, heavier and uglier than just the financial betrayal, began to settle in my gut. This wasn't just about a spoiled stepsister and a weak-willed husband. What if it was something more? What if their bond wasn't one of family loyalty, but something else entirely? The thought was so vile I tried to push it away, but it clung to me, dark and insistent. This vacation wasn't just a vacation. This money wasn't just a gift. It was a transaction. And I had a terrible feeling I knew what they were buying. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face a 12-hour shift surrounded by the beautiful babies I so desperately wanted, not when my own dream had just been so thoroughly annihilated. Instead, I sat at our kitchen table, my laptop open, and a cold cup of coffee beside me. It was time to stop being a victim and start being a detective. My first move was something I'd done 6 months ago, right after Brenda's supposed divorce. I'd watched the way she looked at Russell, the way she leaned on him, and that old, familiar alarm bell had started ringing in my head. So I went to a different bank, a credit union across town, and I opened a separate savings account in my name only. For the last 6 months, every extra shift I picked up, every bit of overtime, it all went directly into that account. I sold some of my grandmother's jewelry, pieces Russell had never even noticed I owned, and deposited the cash. That secret account was my real IVF fund. The joint account he'd emptied had been a decoy. It contained exactly the amount I calculated Brenda might be able to convince him to take. It was my first strategic move in a war I didn't even know I was fighting yet. It was my inheritance, and I would be damned if I let them touch it. Now, fueled by this new, ugly suspicion, I took the next step. I logged into our shared phone plan account. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the usage details for Russell's line. My heart hammered against my ribs. And there it was. Pages and pages of it. Hundreds of calls and texts to Brenda's number every single day. Late at night, after I'd gone to bed. Early in the morning, before I woke up. Dozens of texts back and forth while he was supposedly at work. It was an avalanche of communication that went far beyond what was normal for a brother and stepsister. My next stop was social media. Brenda's profile was public, a curated gallery of her dramatic life. I scrolled back, my stomach churning. And then I found it. An older album, from a year ago, titled Summer Fun. It was mostly pictures of her and her friends. But near the end, there was a photo that made the air leave my lungs. It was Brenda and Russell, standing on a beach at sunset. His arm was around her waist, pulling her tight against him. Her head was tilted onto his shoulder. They weren't smiling at the camera. They were looking at each other. And the look in their eyes, it wasn't familial. It was the look of lovers. The caption underneath was a single word, always. The screen blurred as tears I didn't even know I was holding back finally fell. It all made sense now. The constant crises. The endless need for his money and attention. The way he always chose her. He wasn't her brother. He was her provider. And she wasn't just his stepsister. She was his mistress. The $45,000 wasn't a gift to help a family member in need. It was payment. It was the price of their romantic European getaway, funded by the future of the child they had made sure I would never have. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it almost felt unreal. I wiped my eyes, a strange, cold clarity settling over me. The grief was still there, a hot rock in my chest, but now it was surrounded by ice. I saved a screenshot of the photo. I downloaded the phone records. The time for tears was over. It was time to hire a lawyer. I knew exactly who to call. Last year, I had been the primary nurse for a little girl named Lily Harrison, who was going through a brutal round of chemotherapy. Her father, Jake Harrison, had practically lived at the hospital. He was a quiet, intense man who I later found out was one of the top family law attorneys in the state. We'd bonded over late-night coffee in the hospital cafeteria. I'd helped him navigate the terrifying world of pediatric oncology, and he'd told me that if I ever needed anything at all, I should call him. I never thought I'd have to take him up on that offer. His office was downtown, in a sleek glass building that screamed money and success. When I walked in, his secretary showed me straight back. Jake met me at the door, his face etched with concern. Lorraine, he said, giving me a brief, gentle hug. When you called, you sounded distressed. Please, sit. Tell me everything. So I did. I laid it all out on the polished mahogany of his desk. The joint bank statements. The meticulous records I'd kept for years, showing every dollar I had contributed from my salary. The phone records. And finally, the screenshot of that photo on the beach. Jake listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every word. He picked up the bank statement showing the $45,000 transfer. This transfer, he said, his voice a low growl. This is what we call the smoking gun for financial misconduct. But combined with this, he tapped the screenshot of Russell and Brenda. This isn't just misconduct, Lorraine. This is a calculated dissipation of marital assets to fund an extramarital affair. This is fraud. I felt a wave of validation wash over me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. And you have your own separate account? He asked. Yes, I said. 6 months' worth of my overtime pay. And I sold some jewelry I inherited. Smart, he nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Very smart. Have you told him about your medical situation? I shook my head. No. I wanted to secure my position first. Even smarter, he said. Given the time-sensitive nature of your condition, and the fact that he knowingly gave away funds specifically saved for that medical treatment to his mistress, we can file for an emergency hearing. We can petition to have all their joint assets frozen pending the divorce. Divorce. The word hung in the air between us. For 8 years, I had built my life around that word, marriage. Now, its opposite was my only path forward. I'll take your case, Lorraine, Jake said, his voice firm. And don't you worry about my fee. Consider it a down payment on the debt I owe you for what you did for Lily. We are going to hit him, and we are going to hit him hard. As he started outlining the strategy, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Russell. Thinking of you. I know this is hard, but it was the right thing to do for family. You're the best, babe. I showed the message to Jake. He took a photo of it with his own phone. He's building our case for us, he mused, a grim smile on his face. Does he have any idea you're here? No, I replied, a spark of defiance lighting inside me. He thinks I'm at work. Good, Jake said, gathering the papers into a neat pile. Let's keep it that way. I'll file everything this afternoon. Once we file, Lorraine, there's no going back. I thought about the years of being second best, of my dreams being pushed aside for her dramas. I thought about the baby I might never have. I'm ready, I said, my voice shaking only slightly. Let's burn it all down. The next few days were a blur of quiet, methodical action. Following Jake's advice, I went to the bank and closed our joint credit cards before the divorce papers were served. I then went to the joint savings account and withdrew my documented portion of what was left, a measly few $1,000s that Brenda hadn't managed to convince Russell to give her yet. I was protecting myself, building a financial wall brick by brick. Meanwhile, Brenda and Russell were in Europe, completely oblivious. And they were documenting everything. It was almost comical. Brenda's social media became a fire hose of incriminating evidence. It was no longer just annoying, it was my star witness. There was a picture of them clinking champagne glasses on a balcony in Paris, the Eiffel Tower sparkling behind them. The caption read, "Finally getting the romantic trip we've always deserved. #soulmates." There was a video of them on a gondola in Venice, with Russell's arm draped possessively around her. He was kissing her temple while she giggled at the camera. There was a photo of a receipt from a designer boutique in Rome for a handbag that cost more than my car. A handbag paid for with the money that was supposed to create a life inside me. Each post was another digital nail in their coffin, and I forwarded every single one to Jake with a grim sense of satisfaction. My friend Sarah, a fellow nurse at the hospital, was my lifeline. She was one of the few people who knew about my secret account and my contingency plans. I met her for coffee after my shift, my hands wrapped around a warm mug. "You won't believe this," I said, sliding my phone across the table. Sarah's eyes widened as she scrolled through the gallery of their European love affair. "Oh, my God, Lorraine. They're not even trying to hide it." "They think I don't know," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. "They think I'm at home, sad but understanding, patiently waiting for my turn. They think I'm a fool." "Well, the fools are about to get the shock of their lives," Sarah said, her voice full of steel. "How are you holding up? Really? Honestly?" I looked down at my hands. I feel strangely calm. The pain is there, deep down. But mostly, I just feel focused. Like I have a mission. Every post she makes, every dollar she spends, it just makes my case stronger. She's not just documenting a vacation, she's documenting her own downfall. A new message popped up on my screen. It was an alert from the bank. The divorce papers had been officially served at Russell's office that afternoon. The first shot had been fired. The war had begun. And my enemies were broadcasting their location from halfway across the world, completely unaware that their world was about to end. Russell came home 3 days later. I knew he was back because Sarah texted me a heads up. She'd seen his car pull into the driveway. I had spent the afternoon preparing. Not by packing his bags, that would be too kind. I prepared by setting the stage for the final act of our marriage. I cooked dinner. Not his favorite meal, but mine. A simple roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes. The house smelled warm and inviting, a complete contradiction to the Arctic chill in my heart. I opened a bottle of good wine, a bottle we had been saving for a special occasion. I suppose, in a way, this was one. Then, I set the table. I used our best china, the plates we got as a wedding gift that we only used on holidays. I polished the silverware. I lit a candle. And I set only one place. The front door opened, and I heard his bags drop in the hallway. "Lorraine?" "Honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice full of a weary cheerfulness. He sounded like a man expecting a hero's welcome. He walked into the dining room, whistling, and stopped dead. He took in the scene, the romantic dinner, the single-place setting, and me, sitting at the head of the table, calmly sipping a glass of wine. What's this?" he asked, confusion clouding his face. "Where's my plate?" "I think you should eat at Brenda's tonight," I replied, my voice even. "I'm sure she'd love to hear all about the trip." He stared at me, genuinely puzzled. It was astounding how completely clueless he was. Are you angry? I thought you were okay with this." "We talked about it." "We didn't talk, Russell." "You informed," I corrected him gently. "And I'm not angry." I took another slow sip of wine, meeting his gaze over the rim of the glass. "I'm done." I reached for the large manila envelope I had placed on the empty chair beside me and slid it across the polished wood of the table. It stopped right in front of where his plate should have been. "What is this?" he asked, his voice wary. "I believe the legal term," I said, savoring the moment, "is that you've been served." His face shifted from confusion to disbelief to outright shock as he tore open the envelope. His hands trembled as he pulled out the divorce papers. "Divorce?" he sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. All this over Brenda's vacation?" "No," I said quietly, placing my glass down. My voice was steady, clear, and devoid of any emotion he could use against me. "This isn't about the vacation, Russell. This is about 8 years of watching you choose her over us. The vacation, that was just the final straw." "You're overreacting," he insisted, his voice rising in panic. "We can fix this. We can save up again for the IVF. I'll get a second job. And that was my cue. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment I would take away every last one of his excuses and leave him with nothing but the ugly truth of what he had done. I let his frantic promises hang in the air for a moment, the sound of his desperation a strange music to my ears. He was still trying to fix the problem he thought he understood, the money. He still had no idea what he was truly guilty of. "It's not about the money, Russell," I said, my voice dropping to an almost conversational tone. It was far more effective than shouting. "Though you did steal from me. From us. But I want to show you what you really bought with our IVF fund." I stood up, walked over to the sideboard, and picked up the second envelope I had prepared. I walked back to the table and calmly emptied its contents in front of him. Photos. Glossy, 8x10 prints of the screenshots from Brenda's social media. The first was the picture of them on the beach. "Always," the caption read. The next was the champagne toast in Paris. #soulmates. The last was the video still from the gondola, his lips pressed against her hair. He stared at the photos, the blood draining from his face. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "This wasn't about family, was it, Russell?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "This wasn't about helping your poor, divorced stepsister. This was about you taking your mistress on a romantic European vacation using the money we saved to have a child." "Lorraine. It's not what it looks like," he stammered, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't even touch the photos. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice hardening. "But you know what the truly sick part is? That's not even the worst thing you did." I walked back to the sideboard and picked up the third and final envelope. I placed it on the table on top of the pictures of his affair. "You took that money, the money for our baby, and you gave it to her. And you told me, there's plenty of time." I let those words hang in the air. That was the biggest lie of all. He looked from the envelope to my face, a dawning horror in his eyes. I pushed it towards him. "Open it." With trembling fingers, he opened the last envelope. He pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. It was the report from Dr. Torres. He read it, his eyes scanning the page once, then twice. He saw the diagnosis. He saw the prognosis. And he saw the 3-month window. Our 3-month window. The window he had taken and thrown away on a trip with another woman. He looked up at me, his face a mask of utter devastation. All the lies, all the bluster, all the self-justification, it was all gone. He was stripped bare, and all that was left was the pathetic, cheating man he truly was. Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, his voice cracking. And I looked him dead in the eye. "Would it have mattered? If I had told you, would you have said no to Brenda?" His silence was my answer. It was the only answer I ever needed. He stood there, amidst the wreckage of the life he had single-handedly destroyed. He had lost everything. And I, for the first time in 8 years, finally felt like I had taken back control. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. Alone. If you are still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. This lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1 and listen as I tell you the rest of my story. The 2 months that followed that night were a strange combination of grief and liberation. Russell moved out, and the silence in the house was both deafening and peaceful. I proceeded with my plan, alone. I went to Dr. Torres and told her I was moving forward with the IVF, as a single mother. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a quiet, determined support. I used the money from my secret account, my emergency fund that had now become my new beginning fund. And then, I waited. The 2 weeks after the embryo transfer were the longest of my life. I went to work, I ate, I slept, but my entire being was focused on that tiny spark of hope inside me. I was at the grocery store, staring blankly at a wall of cereal boxes, when my phone rang. It was Dr. Torres's office. I fumbled with the phone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I stepped into the next aisle, my voice a choked whisper. "Hello?" The nurse's voice on the other end was bright and cheerful. "Lorraine? I have your results." "Congratulations, Mom. You're pregnant." I dropped the box of Cheerios. I just stood there in the middle of the cereal aisle and sobbed, tears of joy and relief and grief all mingling together. It had worked. Against all odds, it had worked. My baby, my miracle, was real. As I was building my new future, Russell and Brenda's world was spectacularly imploding. Karma, it turns out, is a patient and methodical force. Sarah called me a week later, her voice practically buzzing with gossip. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. "I am now," I laughed, sinking onto my sofa. "Okay, so, Russell's boss somehow found out about the affair. Apparently, his company has a strict morality clause for executives because they work with family-oriented brands. He was called into a meeting this morning and fired. Effective immediately." I was stunned into silence. "But wait, it gets better," she continued, unable to contain her glee. "Brenda's ex-husband? The one she supposedly had such a messy divorce with? His lawyer got wind of the whole situation, that she was having an affair with Russell while they were still married. He's petitioning the court to reopen their divorce settlement, claiming she committed fraud. It was almost too perfect. While I was nurturing a new life, their lives, built on a foundation of lies and deceit, were crumbling to dust. They had tried to steal my future, and in doing so, they had forfeited their own. They were facing the consequences not just from me, but from the world. The best part was, I didn't have to do a thing. I just had to sit back and focus on myself and my growing baby, and watch them reap what they had so gleefully sown. The day of our final divorce hearing arrived bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy blue suit. The slight swell of my pregnancy was just starting to become visible, a secret source of strength hidden beneath the professional fabric. Russell and Brenda were both there. They looked diminished. The confident, smug glow from their European vacation photos was gone, replaced by a pasty, stressed-out pallor. Brenda's designer clothes looked out of place in the sterile, solemn atmosphere of the courthouse. My lawyer, Jake, was magnificent. He laid out the case with cold, brutal efficiency. He presented the bank statements showing the transfer. He presented the phone records. He presented the social media posts, enlarged and projected for the entire court to see. The photo of them on the gondola, captioned with #soulmates, looked particularly pathetic under the harsh courtroom lights. Then he presented my medical file. He explained the time-sensitive nature of my condition. He explained that the $45,000 was not just marital money, it was designated for a crucial medical procedure. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, looked from the photos of their lavish trip to my medical report. Her gaze settled on Russell, and her voice was laced with ice. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. "You have heard the evidence presented. You took marital funds specifically allocated for your wife's time-sensitive fertility treatment, and used them to take your mistress on a luxury vacation. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Russell stood, looking small and defeated. I made a mistake, Your Honor. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't ask," the judge cut him off sharply. "You engaged in a campaign of deceit, both emotional and financial, that showed a shocking disregard for your wife and your marital vows. This court considers the dissipation of assets for the purpose of funding an adulterous affair to be one of the more egregious forms of financial misconduct." The final ruling was decisive. I was awarded a significant majority of our remaining assets. The house was to be sold, with me receiving 70% of the proceeds. I was awarded full ownership of my pension and retirement accounts, which he could not touch. Russell was ordered to pay back the full $45,000, and a lien was placed on any future assets he might acquire until it was paid in full. Brenda sat there, her face a mask of horror, as the judge suggested she might face a separate civil suit from me for conspiracy to commit fraud. As we left the courthouse, Russell tried to approach me one last time. "Lorraine," he called out, his voice desperate. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Maybe, someday, we could." I turned to face him. I didn't say a word. I simply let my eyes drift downwards and placed my hand, gently and deliberately, on my stomach. His eyes followed my hand. They widened as he noticed the small, definite curve of my baby bump. Realization dawned on his face, followed by a wave of shock so profound it seemed to knock the air out of him. He looked from my belly to my face, his mouth slightly open. "Yes," I said, my voice quiet but firm, answering the question in his eyes. "I am. And this baby will grow up knowing they were wanted, planned for, and chosen first. Always." I turned and walked away without looking back, leaving him standing on the courthouse steps with Brenda, who was already starting to cry and complain about the repayment order. I didn't feel anger or even pity. I felt nothing at all. They were just ghosts from a life that was no longer mine. 6 months later, I was sitting in a rocking chair in my new apartment, in the newly decorated nursery. The walls were a soft, sunny yellow. A mobile of fluffy white clouds and golden stars hung over the crib. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, making dust motes dance in the air. The life I had built for myself, out of the ashes of my old one, was peaceful. It was mine. I had used the money from the sale of the house to buy this cozy 2-bedroom condo closer to the hospital. It was smaller, but it was brighter. It felt like home in a way that old house never had. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a final text from Russell. I had blocked his number months ago, but he must have used a friend's phone. "I heard you had a boy. I hope you and the baby have the life you deserve. I understand now what I lost." I read the message, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of something for him, not forgiveness, but a distant, detached pity. He understood now. But understanding was a booby prize. It couldn't undo the years of lies, and it couldn't give him back what he had so carelessly thrown away. I deleted the message without replying. I looked around the peaceful room, at the stacks of baby books, the tiny clothes folded neatly in the dresser. Sarah had brought over dinner the night before, and we'd sat on the floor of the nursery, eating pizza out of the box and arguing playfully over baby names. My life was full. Not in the way I had once planned, but in a way that felt more real, more authentic. My hand rested on my own belly, which was now round and full. I felt a strong, definite kick from inside, a little hello from my son. A slow smile spread across my face. We had everything we needed. We had each other. "We're going to be just fine, little one," I whispered to the quiet, peaceful room. Just fine indeed. And we were.